Like Jay said, we're continuing our series through Matthew chapter 13. So on the screen right now will be some scripture that we're going to go through this morning. Jesus has been gracious with this parable, same with last week, where he's going to tell us what the parable actually means. And so that's going to be good for us as we walk through it here in a bit this morning. Those of you who have kids, you understand how who your kids are is probably who they have always been, and you saw it pretty early on. Maybe even in their birth, you saw some of it. You saw some of those things pretty early on. We saw it for two of our three kids. We saw that pretty early. But with the middle one, with Kason, it was a bit of an interesting scenario for him. Kason was just tiny when he was born, just tiny. And over the course of the first few weeks, the kid spent most of the day crying. Anybody have newborns like that? Cosolos, you guys good? You got babies who they just cry constantly. He just would not stop crying. And it was driving us crazy. And by us, I mean me, because Meredith's better with that than I am. And so just trying to figure out, what do we do? How do we console him? What do you need us to do? And so we try everything, and I mean everything. With our oldest, with Colton, we thought we were going to be just really good parents and not give him sugar and all the things, right? And so we read that you're not supposed to give them peanuts until they turn a year old. That's how you know they don't have a peanut allergy. We're going to do it. And so it comes to be about, he's a year old, and we drop him off at his babysitter's house. And we say, hey, Miss Brooke, you can start giving Colton peanut butter now. And she just stares at us. And she was like, I've been giving him peanut butter for the past 6 months. I didn't realize I wasn't supposed to do that. But no. Oh, I guess he's not allergic then, so I guess that's good. And is there anything else we need to know? And she was like, yeah, when he gets to my house, I make him Pop-Tarts and I put butter on them, and then I give those to him also. Well, all right, that explains it. So for Kason, though, we were like, man, whatever consoles him, if you're going to drink Dr. Pepper and you're 2 months old, whatever settles, whatever's happening, take it all, man. You can have it all. That's what I kept singing to him. You can have it all, Kason. Trying to console him, nothing was working. We had one friend. We had friends who would come over, just sweetly trying to help us navigate this season. And one of them had a bit of a belly that Kason really liked to sit on. And so that was he liked to just sit on his belly, and just, that's where he could bounce and just chill. So you go to the doctor and find out Kason has colic. He's a colicky little baby. He's got some reflux and gas things. And so we're like, okay, so what's the prognosis here, doc? What are we looking at? He's like, oh, listen, at 3 months old, almost to the day, he will stop being fussy. And I was like, is this like take 2 of these and call me in the morning? Like, are you for real about this? No, I promise you. All right. But what that did for me is that gave me light at the end of the tunnel. You understand what I mean? Like, you're like, okay, if we get to here, and sure enough, almost to the day, at 3 months, Kason became the happiest, most content little boy that you've ever been around. To this day, he is still one of the more joyful, smiley kids. And so what that did for me is it gave me an end. It gave me a chance to, okay, so if that's the end, then I can deal with the middle. If that's the end, I can deal with the middle. And I know then not to try all the things I was trying before. Let me just soothe him in the moment. Let me be present in the moment. Knowing this day is coming, I'm going to be present here with him. I'm not longing for some other day. I'm going to be present here with him. This parable Jesus tells here in Matthew 13 is similar in that way. What Jesus is doing, he's got all these people around him, some who are devoted followers of him, who are committed to him as the Messiah, some who are trying to catch him. They don't believe he's actually the Messiah. They're trying to catch some lies that he's sharing. And then there are some who are just curious, trying to figure it all out. And so in this crowd, Jesus tells this parable. And in this parable, it doesn't go the way that anyone in the crowd thought it was going to go. Because everyone in the crowd, at least who'd been raised in a Jewish or a Hebrew home, had an idea of what the world would be like when the Messiah came. And at the top of that list was that when the Messiah comes, the Jews will no longer be oppressed. They'll be delivered. And at this point, they're being oppressed by the Roman government. And then some of the more God-fearing, Messiah-driven Jews are being now oppressed by the religious elite. And the religious elite sees this Jesus saying he's the Messiah, and they're like, there's no way, because when the Messiah comes, then we're free, and we're still under the reign and rule of the Roman Empire, so you can't be him. But what Jesus lays out here is just disturbing for all the hearers. It doesn't make sense to any of them, and that's kind of the point. So what Jesus does is he tells the parable, and he's outside, And then he ends up going back inside the house. So he tells this parable and 2, 3, 4 other ones, and then he makes his way back into the house. So I want to take us forward into verse 36, where Jesus goes back into the house, and I'm going to show you why. Verse 36 of Matthew 13, Jesus left the crowds and went into the house, and his disciples, now the 12 apostles, came to him. Now they're in secret, like they were like, yeah, we totally get it. And they get inside and they're like, we don't get it. I don't understand any of it. I can imagine Peter being like, hey, listen, Jesus, I totally get it, but John's really struggling. So can you just share with us what the parable means? His disciples came to him saying, explain to us the parable of the weeds of the field. He's gone through other parables. I'm still stuck on this one. I'm still stuck. Help us. So Jesus answers, okay, here's the key, right? Here's all the characters. The one who sows the good seed is the Son of Man. Now, the Son of Man is Matthew's favorite way to reference Jesus as the Messiah. So he's saying the one who sows the good seed is Jesus, it's the Messiah. The field is the world. The good seed is the sons of the kingdom. They are followers of Jesus. We'll call them Christians. The weeds are the sons of the evil one. So that's non-Christians. Then verse 39, and the enemy who sows those seeds, the weed seeds, is the devil. The harvest is the end of the age, and the reapers are angels. So Jesus now has given us the key, right? So you got to put that to the side. This is who it is. We're going to walk back through the parable with this new understanding in mind, because Jesus tells them exactly what he means. It's going to help us, but it's really going to cause some problems for us when we read it. So let's go back into verse 24. Let's read back through the parable. It's going to take some crowd participation. You're about to get pop quizzed on what you just learned about who's who. It's going to be helpful for us. Begin in verse 24. Jesus put another parable before them. Now, this word for parable, we got to talk a bit. Parable means to lay alongside. A parable is a story, a real life story, a real situation that Jesus takes and he lays it alongside of a theological truth. There's a twofold purpose to his parables. It is not to make things understandable for everyone. Please hear me in that. He's not putting the cookies on the bottom shelf. Do we all get it now? He's actually speaking to different groups of people. For those who actually want to learn, those who Jesus would say have ears to hear, it's going to grow a depth of knowledge and wisdom and understanding for them. But for those in the crowd who aren't interested in hearing the truth from Jesus, it's actually going to confound them even more. And in some way, this is purposeful of Jesus. He's making some distinctions through his parables. So let me give you a few rules about parables. First is this: they are not fables. And what I mean is, animals don't talk in parables, right? There's no flying birds that sing songs to little princesses. That's not what's happening here. A fable is a real life thing. This is a real life scenario. When he lays this story alongside a theological truth, the hearers would have known exactly what he's talking about. It's like if I'm going to teach you about patience and I'm going to reference Highway 81. You know exactly what I'm talking about. Like, you completely get it. That's what's happening here. So it's not a fable. It's not a fairy tale. Not all parables have happy endings. They don't all end with the princess marrying the prince and him no longer being a beast anymore. That's not what happens. Thirdly, they're not allegories. What I mean by that is not everything inside of a parable has some symbolic meaning. We make a mess of them when we try to make things mean things they don't actually mean. This is a narrative from beginning to end. The entire thing has a point. And the point is illumination. The point is to open our eyes to things that have not been seen before. One author named Klein Snodgrass wrote a book about the parables, and he calls the illumination the revelation of God. And he says, revelation from God is not merely thrown out and grasped on the run. What he's saying is, it's not fast food or a TV dinner. This is meant to be taken time with. Take your time. Let it marinate, absorb some of it. Take your time, read it from beginning to end. Read it again from beginning to end, and then again from beginning to end. The danger for us with a fable, a fairy tale, and an allegory is to find the point we like, the first point we like, and we pull it out of the story, and that becomes what we build our lives on. I talked about it last week. One of the greatest examples of that is the story of the prodigal son. If you stop reading the story of the prodigal son halfway through, sure, you get the idea that the father is gracious and welcomes the prodigal home, but you miss the entire point of the older brother at the end of it. This whole thing has a point. And so Jesus lays this parable before the crowd for illumination. And what's the illumination about? Look at the rest of 24, the kingdom of heaven. Jesus has come, and his entire ministry, the whole reason he's come to earth is to declare, repent, for the kingdom of heaven is near, it's at hand, or it's present. That's his entire message, over and over again. I mean, we would think, well, he's going to talk about the cross and crucifixion and sacrifice. Sometimes. He's going to talk about love and forgiveness. Yeah, sometimes. But the predominant message of Jesus is the kingdom of heaven. So it behooves us in the 21st century to understand, what is he talking about with the kingdom of heaven? Well, this illustration here is going to help us a bit. So Jesus would describe the world in this way. There's two kingdoms. There's a kingdom of this world, and then there's the kingdom of heaven. In the Old Testament, it's referred to as the kingdom of this age. It's referred to a number of different ways. And that the kingdom of heaven is referred to the kingdom of the age to come, heaven itself. That's how we differentiate between the two. It's a biblical idea from Genesis all the way through. That's the idea for us. And sadly, what's been taught about these two kingdoms, particularly in evangelical churches, and if it's not been taught, it's been insinuated, is that the goal of the Christian life is to move from the kingdom of this world and be transported to the kingdom of heaven. And so we've built our whole lives around this idea that I just have to get out of here. It's the same way you just viewed this past week of your work life, isn't it? If I can just get to 5 o'clock, if I can just get to the weekend. Students would say, if I can just make it to practice, if I can just get to lunch, if I can just get to recess. And so we've begun to think theologically that the whole point of following Jesus is to know the right things and get the right ticket to get to the next world. That's how we've oriented ourselves. And it's fine if you want to believe that. Your problem is the Bible. That's your problem. Your problem is the Bible doesn't teach that. The Bible doesn't teach escapism. It never has. It doesn't teach that at all. Look back through any of the stories of the people of the Old Testament. God was with them through it, and then he brought them out of it. He didn't just pluck them out of somewhere. He was always with them through it. This is the story of Scripture. Not that we move from here to get to there, but instead that the kingdom of heaven has overlapped, has invaded the kingdom of this world. That's the story of Scripture. Not that we graduate from earth and then get to heaven, but that heaven is here. Now, I think we have a graphic of that, Carrie. Keep going. Next one. There it is. So this is the image that I think we need to have in our minds, because the old image has really jacked up a lot of our theology. And it's affected the way that we view people. Because no longer do we view people as souls with an eternity in mind. We view them as obstacles that we have to deal with until God calls us home to glory. It changes the way we view church, changes the way we view discipleship, it changes the way that we view sermons and songs, it changes the way we read Revelation, which is a whole other conversation. But we've got an issue. But what Jesus is declaring is this. So now he's going to share these parables to tell us what the kingdom of heaven is like. So the first parable of the sower of the seeds, that told us what parables are. This now, he's going to spend the rest of 13 telling us about the kingdom of heaven. Do you have ears to hear? That's the question. He who has ears to hear, let him hear. So here's what Jesus says. This kingdom of heaven may be compared to a man who sowed good seed. Who is the man? Jesus. Yeah, thank you, Micah. Very Sunday school of you. Yeah, the man is Jesus, right? The Son of Man. We just read this later in chapter 13. You're going to have to keep your notes there if you want to. The man is Jesus. The kingdom of heaven might be compared to this, that Jesus sowed good seed. Who is the good seed? Christians, yes, followers of Jesus. So the kingdom of heaven is like this. It's like Jesus planted Christians in the field. And what is the field? The world. So the kingdom of heaven is almost as if Jesus planted Christians inside the world. It's almost as if there's two circles that are overlapping, but that's a whole other thing. So he's saying the kingdom of heaven, it's like this. It's like Jesus planted the seeds of Christianity, of Christians themselves, and he placed them in the world. And then verse 25, but while his men were sleeping. So now the question is, well then, who do the men represent? We don't know, and Jesus doesn't tell us, so don't waste your time. I don't know. I don't know who they are. It's not an allegory. This is just part of the story. Men were sleeping, and the enemy, who is the enemy? Yeah, Satan, the devil. So Jesus planted Christians in the world, and the devil came and sowed weeds. And who are the weeds? Non-Christians, the sons of the evil one, according to verse 38. So again, let's think through all of this. Jesus has planted Christians in the world. And at the same time, right after that now, Satan comes in, the devil comes in and plants his workers, the sons of the devil, non-believers in the same world. Anybody experienced this in your life? Has anyone had a similar experience to this? And he planted them there among the wheat. Who are the wheat? Christians, among the Christians. Think about your neighborhood. Is this true? So, verse 26, when the plants came up, who are the plants? The wheat, that's the Christians, and they bore grain, they produced fruit. Well, what do you know? Then the weeds also appeared. So while they're growing, it's like there's no weeds, but then when there comes time for fruit bearing, for grain, you see them. And the servants of the master of the house came and said to him. So here's the first question Jesus lays before us. Master, I thought you were a good farmer. I thought you were good at your job. Didn't you sow good seed? You can't tell me you got the wrong seed in here. You got the wrong seed? How then does it have weeds? I thought you sowed good seed in your field, but how then does it have weeds? It's like the workers, the servants of the master, the workers of the field are like, how come there's bad things happening and good people are there too? How come you got this? What's happened? Like, I thought you were good. I thought you were good, a good farmer. So Jesus, again, is giving us a commentary on the kingdom, the good news, the gospel of the kingdom. Does this sound like good news? The good news is that in the field of good growth, there will be weeds. That's good news. And he continues, and the question is, well, why all the weeds? And if you've experienced this journey with us through Matthew, you've seen some weeds. You've seen some opposition to the gospel. You've seen some pushback. You've seen some revolts. In fact, when Matthew lays out the 12 apostles, he mentions a man by the name of Judas and doesn't just leave him as Judas, then he calls him the one who betrayed Jesus. It's almost as if Jesus, in his inner 12, is experiencing this very same thing. And so they ask, well, then where do all the weeds come from? And the response of the farmer, who is Jesus, well, an enemy has done this. Who is the enemy? Out loud's good. Yeah, Satan, the devil. Right? So this isn't a case of, well, the devil made me do it, although in some ways that's what's happening. Not as an excuse, but as evidence. So the question is, I thought you were good. I thought you were good. What is all this evil in the world? Oh yeah, well, the enemy did that. The enemy planted the evil in the world. Well, how did he do that? I don't know. I just know that he did. All we know, the Bible is doesn't give us very many details on this. But an angel fell from heaven and revolted against the Lord. That's what we know. You can dress it up however you want, theologize it however you want to. But here's the point. Back in Genesis, God created the world, everything was as it should be, and somehow sin entered the cosmos. Evil entered the cosmos. How? I don't know. And I don't know that's the point of the Bible. But there's sin, the enemy has done this. So let me show you another graphic to help us understand some of this. Because there's a third player in regards to the kingdom, and that is hell. No, I thought hell would be like underneath the kingdom of this world. Did you read that somewhere? Hell. The idea of hell is evil. It's pure, unadulterated evil. And the point Jesus is making is that in the kingdom of the world, there's been an invasion. And the kingdom of heaven is making its way into the kingdom of this world. But what's already at work in the kingdom of this world is the kingdom of hell. It's evil. And in fact, throughout the Old and New Testament, Jesus himself would call the Pharisees, he would say, yeah, you're producing children of hell. You're producing more children of hell just like you. Hell has made its way into our world. So Jesus sees the world as enemy-occupied territory. I want you to understand this. At the fall in Genesis 3, hell began to seep its way into the world. And you experience it, and I don't mean your boss or your ex-wife. What I'm saying is, you experience it in your very own heart and mind. Because you know those moments when you know you shouldn't, and you fight not to, and yet you end up doing it anyway, yeah, you've chosen hell over the kingdom of heaven. It's in our very lives. It's in the way that we drive. It's in the way that we shop. It's in the fact that some of you don't put your grocery carts back. Hell. That's what that is. It's pure evil. So it's in our world, and Jesus sees the world as enemy-occupied territory. And the declaration is, not for long. At the coming of Jesus, at his birth, and Revelation paints a beautiful picture of this. At the birth of Jesus, all hell broke loose to attack the woman and her offspring. Because back in Genesis chapter 3, Jesus said, I'm gonna put enmity between you and the woman and you and the offspring, and that offspring will crush the head of hell, the serpent. And so Jesus is now invading. His presence, his very presence is an invasion to take back what is rightfully his, and that is the souls of humanity. See it, you've gotta see it. Get eyes to see, ears to hear. Do you see it? In your world, in my world, at your workplace, at the schools, on your ball teams, all of it, hell is seeping in. And I don't want to get into a whole dissertation about the ways in which hell is seeping in, but it is. And Jesus has come back to take back what is rightfully his. And that is your soul, and that's mine, and the souls of our children. He's going to redeem them. That's the whole point of all of this. And so the servants here, there's weeds. What do you want? There's weeds. And so they ask the master, you want us to go out and gather them? So there's weeds in your field. You want us to go pluck all the weeds? Let's get rid of the weeds. Let's take care of the weed problem. We've identified it. Let's take care of that problem. Those of you who have weeds in your yard, has that gone well for you when you pluck up weeds? Do they just go away forever? They come back, don't they? It's like they go tell their friends. They go to your neighbor's yard like, hey, you know what he just did to me? Let's go. So now the weeds seep into your yard and they're everywhere. And so they asked, let's deal with it. I hate the weeds, let's deal with the problem. Who are the weeds? Yeah, you can talk. Non-Christians, yes. But look at the response of the farmer. He said, no. No. But I thought the whole point was to redeem this place. I thought that was the whole point, was to get the hell out of here. I thought that was the whole point. He says, no, because here's the problem. When you gather the weeds, you're gonna root up the wheat. Who are the wheat? Christians. You're gonna root up the wheat along with them. Farmer is saying there's danger in pulling the weeds before the right time. There's danger. And the danger is you actually uproot the wheat with it. And some of us have experienced that because you grew up in churches where it was proclaimed hell and brimstone from the stage. And it pushed non-Christians further away. And in fact, you began to question if God was actually good. Did that not uproot the wheat along with the weeds? This whole concept of being transported from this place of earth to a place of heaven when we die. I can't wait. I just got to get there when I die. Has that not done some damage among the wheat? And so Jesus is saying, no. So what's the plan? He understands that we are terrible evaluators of wheat versus weeds. Goodness, we're bad at it. Because the moment a football player thanks God for something, we're like, he's one of us, look at him. He thanked God. That's a wheat. Is it? That's a wheat? We're also really bad about cooking Christians when they're down. Well, he's a weed now. I thought he was wheat, but look at him. Look at what he's done. He's weeds. Let me just paint a picture for you. Let's say you've got a brilliant songwriter. Let's say he's written a bunch of songs for the church to sing. And we're singing them. And then it comes out that this songwriter has had an affair. He's committed adultery. And then in the midst of his adultery, he concocts this plan to have his lover's husband murdered. Are we singing those songs anymore in your church? Are you gonna sing them anymore? Actually, you are, because that was David. And he wrote the Psalms. And we'd be like, oh, he's a weed. No, he's not. No, I could tell. I saw it from the beginning. I knew that's who he was. And yet here we are. Let's say you've got a pastor, and this pastor is just passionate about Jesus. I mean, just passionate about him, devoted to him, close to him. And there's this crisis in his life, and he really begins to wonder if Jesus actually is who he says that he is. He's actually approached by people, and on the internet, he's like, no, I'm not anymore. You may think that's who I am, but I'm actually not him. And then from that point forward, he gives up ministry, gives up following Jesus, goes back to his old business of sales, and he goes back into sales. He just forsakes Jesus altogether until at one point he meets Jesus again. Are you reading his books? Is he preaching in your church? Yeah, because his name is Peter, and that was his. Well, he's a weed. Why? We're terrible at it. The moment someone falls, we begin to condemn them to hell, as if we've never fallen before. So Jesus says, no, listen, you have no idea who the wheat and the weeds are to begin with. I don't want you doing any of this. We love to judge, but goodness, we're terrible at it. It's why you love cooking shows, because you think you're qualified to judge people's cooking. But we're terrible at it. It's far above our pay grade. So Jesus, no, here's what I want you to do. Verse 30, I want you to let them both grow together until the harvest. Grow until the harvest. And then at harvest time, I will tell the reapers. Who are the reapers? Angels, yeah. And what is harvest time? The end of the age. At the end of the age, I'll tell the angels, gather the weeds, the non-Christians first, bind them into bundles and be burned, but gather the wheat into my barn. You wanna know why we're such terrible distinguishers between weeds and wheat? It's hidden inside of this parable. Only we don't know it. How many of you, the heading of your Bible says the wheat and the weeds for this? It says wheat and weeds. Anybody say wheat and tares, T-A-R-E-S, you King James people? Yeah. Tares is probably a better translation because that is a different kind of weed. The weed here is what's called darnel. In the Greek, that's what it translates to for us is the weed called darnel. There's a picture here I want to show you of wheat and darnel. Do you see how similar they are? It's hard to distinguish between the two while they're growing. It's called darnel, weeds, tares. In fact, the very kind that's being referenced here is called bearded darnel, which I think was a friend I went to high school with. His name was Bearded Darnell, but it's a kind of wheat. It's actually a weed, and it's called a mimic weed because it's made to mimic wheat. It's the whole point. It's a false weed. It looks just like wheat until it produces grain. And so while it's growing, it looks exactly the same until it produces grain. And so the wheat produces like a golden amber wave of grain kind of color, but the darnel is more dark brown or black. And only at harvest time can you distinguish between the two. But the problem with darnel is that darnel seeps its roots into the ground, and then the roots intertwine with the roots of the wheat. They just jump on the back of the wheat, and that's how they grow. And so literally, to try to pull up darnel because it's so intertwined with the roots of the wheat, you would pull the wheat along with it. And the farmer knows, again, real life story Jesus is laying out. And every farmer knows, no, don't. Because you're gonna ruin my crop. Here's what we're gonna do. We're gonna wait until the harvest. And at the harvest, when we pull them out of the ground, then we can undo it. We can undo the interlacing of the wheat and the darnel, and then we'll have the wheat. We're gonna wait. You can't do it now. And in fact, to do it now causes more problems than you think it would. And this darnel, people would actually eat its seeds. It's toxic. But they would eat its seeds. And when they would get dizzy, off balance, and nauseous, which sounds like college for a lot of you. And the official, like the Latin name for darnel actually translates to drunk. And so people would harvest darnel and they would sell it, or they would make what they call dizzy bread. We would call it special bread. They would make dizzy bread, and this is what they would hand out. So this is a real thing. It's a real problem in wheat fields. And Jesus is like, listen, you can't tell the difference. I know you think you have the gift of discernment and God bless you. But how do you know? Because if we were gonna pull up the weed of David, we wouldn't have the Psalms. if we're going to pull up the weed of Moses and the weed of Peter and John, we're going to pull up the weeds of Matthew himself, a tax collector. The truth is, you and I are not qualified to judge anyone's salvation at all, at any point. We don't get to. We don't get to judge churches. We don't get to judge people. We're not qualified to do it. Jesus tells us in verse 30, I'm going to let them both grow together until the end of the age. And at the end of the age, I will tell the angels, gather the weeds, bind them in bundles to be burned, and gather the wheat into my barn. So I can stand here confidently and tell you we are not qualified to judge. I can also tell you confidently there is one who is, and he will. And that's the sobering truth of this parable. At the end of the age, those who mimic wheat but are still weeds will be separated. The false Christians, the false believers, those who are good Southern people and who think they're Christians because they were born in Georgia, those people will be separated. Those who oppose Christianity will be separated. They'll be thrown, what Jesus calls here, into a fiery furnace. That's a metaphor, whole other sermon, but that's what he's talking about. There is a judge coming, and that's what's sobering here. But Christian, I want you to hear this. There's an end coming. And so the battles you feel with your own Darnell inside of you, there's an end coming. It won't be this way forever. But to understand that you aren't the one to do it has to change the way we view the present. That's the whole point of the parable, is that it changes how we view the present. And the present is they will grow together. Jesus continues to explain it in verse 40, as the weeds are gathered and burned with fire, so will it be at the end of the age. The Son of Man will send his angels to gather out of his kingdom all causes of sin and all lawbreakers. Causes of sin is the word where we get stumbling blocks, all stumbling blocks, and those who sin, and throw them into the fiery furnace. In that place there will be weeping and gnashing of teeth. And then the righteous will shine like the sun in the kingdom of their Father. He who has ears, let him hear. The Bible is clear on this too. The Bible is clear on an end. And at the end is where judgment happens. And you and I don't sit at the judge's seat to judge. We sit to be judged. There is an end coming. And ultimately, there's an ultimate victory for the kingdom of heaven. It's going to look like this. The ultimate victory of the kingdom of heaven is that it overwhelms and overthrows the kingdom of this world. That's heaven. If you actually study the book of Revelation, it doesn't end with you and me on streets of gold behind pearly white gates. It ends with a new city, a new Jerusalem, a new heaven, and a new earth. That's the point. It's this invasion that overwhelms. And Jesus reveals to John, when I do that, he says, there will be a group who have been kicked out of the city where there is weeping and gnashing of teeth. At the end of the day, there will be no more hell in heaven. Jesus would have gotten the hell out of earth and out of the kingdom of heaven. That's the hope we have. But knowing that should shape how we live now. So then what do we do, right? What do we do now? If we live in the overlap of the two, what do we do? If where we live now is that you've got the kingdom of heaven and the kingdom of earth, and then you've got hell inside of it, then what do we do? Like how do we live in such a way? The temptation is for us to be like the workers in the parable. The temptation is to judge and pull up all the weeds. I gotta get rid of the weeds. I gotta get the hell out of my school, gotta get the hell out of my business, how do I do it? I gotta pull up all of the weeds. We're gonna get the hell out of this world, one weed at a time. Which sounds a lot like James and John in Luke chapter 9. Luke tells us when the days drew near for Jesus to be crucified, to be taken up, he set his face to go to Jerusalem. He turned to head towards Jerusalem for his crucifixion. And he sent messengers ahead of him who entered a village of the Samaritans to make preparations for him. But the people in Samaria did not receive him. Why? Because his face was set toward Jerusalem. He was Jew. And when his disciples, James and John, saw it, they said, you want us to pull up the weeds? Lord, do you want us to tell fire to come down from heaven and consume them? I think that's hilarious, by the way. That James and John think they have like a more of an in to heaven than Jesus does. Hey, you see, you're struggling a bit, Jesus. You want us to handle it? You want us to call down fire from heaven to consume them? That's what they're saying. You want us to pull up the weeds? We see the way the Samaritans are treating you. They've got to be weeds. You want us to handle it? Let's just send fire. Let's do that. Let's destroy all of them. But look at Jesus' response in verse 55. He turned and rebuked them. Why? Because the parable is to let the wheat and the weeds grow together until the harvest, because you really don't know. Well, they're Samaritans. Okay. Well, they struggle with this. They have this addiction. They're same-sex attracted. Okay. What do we do? Ultimately, for the sons of thunder, James and John, and for many of us, the reason we want to call down fire from heaven is not about the kingdom of heaven. It's about our comfort and convenience. Let's be honest about it. You don't know why we want that? You don't know why we want that out of our schools? You don't know why we want a new teacher, a new superintendent, a new boss, a new husband, a new wife, you know why? Because it would make us more comfortable. It's not about an invasion. It's about vacation. It's about us having a break. But the kingdom of heaven is not a vacation, it is an invasion. And so while you're busy trying to pull up weeds that you might have a vacation from sin in the world, how's that going for you? Have all the weeds just got up and left? We spend so much of our efforts trying to pull weeds. So much of our energy and emotion and time and social media posting, we try to pull up all the weeds. It's actually become an addiction for some of us. You've moved now from pulling out weeds in the world to condemning people in the church. It's become a habit that we're just addicted to. But the best antidote for weeds is healthy wheat. Any farmer would tell you that. Any landscaper would tell you that. You know how you get rid of weeds in your yard? You grow good grass. That's how you do it. So back to the parable, Jesus says, I just need to plant more wheat. We just need more wheat. The play here, what's the play? You look at the captain in the huddle. All right, what's the play, quarterback? He's like, we need more and better wheat. That's what we need. It's always been the play. Always, from the beginning of creation, it's always been the play. It's an invasion. We need more and better wheat. That's always been the goal. And it's always been the play. I want to step outside the parable. I feel like the Lord's just leading me in this direction. For some of you, you've got a sin, a stronghold that's entangled you. Connor talked about it earlier. This thing that so easily ensnares us. And you've spent so much energy trying to pull out that weed that you've actually pulled out some good stuff with it. Let me give you an illustration. Close your eyes, and I want you to not think of a pink elephant. Stop thinking about a pink elephant. Don't think about a pink elephant. Think about something else, not a pink elephant. How many of you have a pink elephant in your mind right now? That's what happens for us. We get so fixated on the weeds. Here's the message of the gospel. Turn your eyes to Jesus. Your fixation with your sin and your navel gazing and shame and guilt will just lead you back into it. The play has always been more and better wheat. And that's the goal of One Way. Let's just turn your eyes to Jesus. Because when you fix your eyes on Jesus, the things of this world grow strangely dim in the light of his glory and grace. And if we're so fixated on the sin of this world, and we are evangelicals, we are. Goodness, we're obsessed. It's all you see. But the play is not the obsession with the weeds. The play is adoration of the King. That's the play. We want more and better wheat. We just sang songs. Well, you can have it all. We sang songs about things of this world will grow strangely dim. We sing songs like that, but do we mean it? But you're so hell-bent on getting hell out of Henry County, getting hell out of schools, that you've missed the point. The point is it's an invasion. and light overcomes the darkness. We win. That's the point. Jesus, before he ascends into heaven and finishes his ministry on earth, he lays before his disciples what we call the Great Commission. And he says to the disciples in Matthew 28, Jesus came and said to them, all authority in heaven and on earth has been given to me. Go therefore and make disciples of all nations. Now pay attention. He does not say, go therefore and get rid of all the sinners. Go therefore and boycott all those sinful companies. Go therefore and impeach sinful presidents. You know what happens when you impeach a sinful president? You just get another one. That's all you get. Like, what do we think's gonna happen? This one's gonna be better. No, he's not. Or she, no, they're not. He does not say, go therefore and get rid of school superintendents and bosses and coaches. No. He says, go and make more and better wheat. It's the call of the church. It's the clarion call. It's the singular focus of the church to make disciples. He doesn't say go and make disciples of people that look like you, people that sound like you, people that think the way you do. No, of all nations. Well, how do we do that? Well, we baptize them in the name of the Father, the Son, and the Holy Spirit. We immerse them in theology. We immerse them in it. Then what do? Well, we teach them to observe all, not some, not the parts you like, observe all that I have commanded you. Many of us are pleading for fire from heaven to destroy the sin in the world, and this is a cry for the fire of heaven to reignite passion in your own soul for the Lord. We're too busy asking for God to send fire to destroy, and we should be asking God to send fire to disciple us. That's what we're asking for. To make disciples, we teach them. This is about a passion for and a commitment to deeper roots, to more and better wheat. You know how you face the weeds of sin in the world? You grow deep roots. And at the harvest, it will show itself. Which is why, like as a church, I'm more and more convinced the role of the church is this. It's more and better wheat. It's why we offer training classes. It's why we offer D groups and small groups. It's why we have recovery groups. It's all of it. Because we will not make it trying to pluck out weeds in the world. Because weeds just grow back. The way forward will always be your depth of discipleship. Always. Well, I don't have time for it. Well, then what do you want? You got time to pick weeds. I'm just saying shift your attention here. Let's learn more and more about the Lord, more and more about who Jesus says that he is. What this means, you have fire in our church, but it means fire in our homes too. You cannot delegate the spiritual discipleship of your children to a youth pastor. And I know it feels like a burden, and that's a shame. It is a joy. Well, I don't have time. Well, then you got to make time. Then other things are clogging up the roadway and the pathway to discipleship. Do you have fire in your own home? The way you feel about the opposing political party, do you have that same passion about your kids knowing who Jesus is in your home? How about with your wife or your husband? Or are all your conversations about The Bachelor and the Falcons? Like, what if you had spiritual conversations with your spouse? You actually talked about the Lord together. You prayed together. This was in our homes with our kids. It's about spiritual calendars. It means we change the way we live our weeks and our days. And this is ultimately about fire in our own souls. Not fire from heaven to condemn, but fire from heaven to convict. How's that going for you? How's your study? How's your accountability? How are you spending your time? The play of the kingdom has never been about leaving this world to get to another one. It's been about the invasion of that one coming to this one. And he uses people like you and like me. And he uses us where we live and where we work and where we play. He uses it where you do taekwondo. He uses this where your kids go to school, on the travel ball teams your kids play on. This is it, man. Like, ears, do you have ears? Do you hear it? Do you see it? But the end of the Great Commission is the most important part for us. And behold, Jesus says, I am with you, even to the end of the age. I know we feel like we can't do it, and we'd be right. But the farmer is with us to the very end of the age, fertilizing, nurturing, growing, watering, providing sunlight. You can do it. We can. The question is, do you want to? Because it's far easier to point out weeds than it is to grow our wheat. It doesn't cost us anything to complain about people and governments and schools and politicians. It costs us nothing, but it will cost you everything to be discipled. But I'm telling you it's better. I'm telling you it's better. Would you bow your heads and close your eyes, and we'll wrap up here. I don't know where you find yourself here today. And maybe you've grown up in a world, in a culture, in a church that's taught you the whole point is just to get out of here to get to somewhere better. Goodness, hasn't that affected the way you see your coworker? Like the guy you ride in a truck with 40 hours a week. You can't believe he talks that way. You can't believe the things that he says. What do you expect him to do? And instead of trying to get a new coworker who actually loves the Lord, what if God placed you in this coworker's life? What if it's you? What if it's you on that football team with that kid? Yeah, you'll never see a down in the game. Maybe you're the only Jesus that kid will ever see. Well, I wish we had more Christian coaches. Well, then coach. The point of the kingdom is not to escape, it's to engage. And we engage because the weeds and the wheat grow together. There's an end coming. So for some of you today, I hate leveraging this, but there is an end coming. And the invitation is to move from being a weed to being wheat, to actually surrendering all of yourself to the work of Jesus. We call that following him. We call that being a Christian. I want to invite you to believe in his finished work on the cross. And then there are some of us today. You're going to have to spend less time this week pointing out and trying to pull up weeds. You're causing damage in the kingdom. And instead, fix your eyes on the farmer who just keeps sowing seed. You might grow better and more wheat. God, we come to you, not a clue of how to do any of this, but the gift of the commission is that you are with us always. So we've got questions, and some maybe you'll answer, some maybe you won't, because they're not the point. But what seems clear to me is that we need to open our eyes to the invasion of heaven making its way to earth. And we need to open our eyes to the fact that we win the day. Hell has no chance against the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords. So I think what we're asking today, God, is that you would grow our roots deeper, that even in our community, in our churches, in our ministries, you would grow more and better wheat, that the invasion would take place even in Ola, Conyers, and Covington, and Locust Grove. We would see it in our lifetime. It's in Jesus' name I pray, amen.